So, race hustle rhetoric, what is it? Coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Common Sense, Logic, and Reason. And as always, thank y'all for joining me today. So, if you watch any of my videos for any length of time, you will have heard me say the word race hustle rhetoric or use that expression. And I've given numerous examples. I've had many videos on race hustle rhetoric, specific examples. But if you were ever wondering, okay, well, what exactly is race hustle rhetoric? Well, I'm going to explain in this video. Now, I don't like to play around, but race hustle rhetoric basically is an example that black people use, or the race hustlers use, as evidence that America is a racist society. And the reason why I call it race hustle rhetoric is because, well, the race hustlers are the ones who come up with this stuff. And then black people start repeating it, and not just black people, but leftists in general, they start repeating it to the point that it just becomes rhetorical. That's why I call it race hustle rhetoric, because it's just rhetorical nonsense that they all spew. And some black person, some race hustler comes up with some evidence that America is racist, and everybody will latch onto it, and they'll go and keep speaking in it, spewing it out, and then somebody else will come up with some example of race hustle rhetoric, some example of quote-unquote racism, and then they'll spew it, and then everybody latch onto it, and they spew it, and then somebody else will come up with some rhetoric, and then so on and so forth. And then you just have people who just spew a whole lot of rhetorical nonsense. And what I find funny, though, is that they always arm themselves with the example, but they never really arm themselves with the ability to defend the example. But then you can't really defend the indefensible. Now, in my experience, I've identified two types of race hustle rhetoric. One being end result thinking, and the other being historical crime. End result thinking is a process of finding any end result that's unfavorable to me, my group, my organization, whether it be black people, white feminists. Feminists will cry about sexism, black folks are crying about racism, homosexuals is homophobia, and so on and so forth. But they'll look at the end result of any disparity that's unfavorable to them. For black folks, is always between black and white people. For some reason, there's only blacks and white people in America. There are no other groups, no other races. It's just black versus white. But black people, they'll look at it, find any end result, any disparity in society that's unfavorable to black people, in which black people are not equal to or on par with white people on something, and they just assume that it's racism. They never do any research into why we got there. Again, leftists aren't into the why. They're only into the what. How or why, who cares about the how or why? I just see the what, and I don't like it, and I'm going to blame somebody. Now, a perfect example of end result thinking that you commonly hear is mass incarceration of black people. And where did that come from? Well, somebody somewhere looked at some stats, end result stats, and saw that, black people, when I last checked, we were like 39% of the prison population, but we're only 13% of the population of America. So we make up almost like 3 times the population of the prison population than we do the population of America. And thus somebody see this and saw a disparity that they didn't like, and then cried racism. And that's where the whole mass incarceration argument comes from. Now, obviously, of course, they don't do their real research into how we got there, right? So they don't look at and see that it's the mass crime committed by black people that's causing the mass incarceration. As a matter of fact, the rate in which we as blacks commit crime in America, and not me because I ain't no criminal, but unfortunately there's so much criminal activity amongst black people that is just highly concentrated amongst my race. And if you look at the rate in which we as black people commit crime, the incarceration rate percentage should be even higher. But of course, they don't care about that because it doesn't support the argument. They're just concerned about the fact that we make up such a large percentage of the prison population, and it gives them an excuse to cry about racism. Now, historical crime is pretty much the same thing. It's just done from the standpoint of history. You know, they'll find some historical situation or event that's unfavorable to black people and cry. Now, this is forget the fact that it's completely irrelevant to today, that it has no impact upon black people today, but we still gonna cry about it nonetheless. Now, a perfect example of this would be the bombing of Black Wall Street. What happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma back in 1921. So we're coming up on a 100-year anniversary in June. And yet black people are still crying about this, using this as an example of how America is a racist society. Now, it's not happening anymore. Okay, they're still not bombing blacks in Tulsa, Oklahoma anymore. Okay, there's black people in Tulsa, Oklahoma are not being held back or not being prevented from doing achieving anything in America because of that event that took place coming up 100 years ago. Yet they still cry. You have black people all over the country using this as example of racism and the white supremacy in America. Again, that's end result thinking. And if you pay attention to all the excuses that black people, or examples that black people try to use as that America's a racist society, they're going to either fall under one of those two. It's going to be them looking at some disparity, looking at the end result of something, and never seeing what transpired, how we got there, completely ignoring that, or crying about some irrelevant historical event that's irrelevant to today, that not stopping anybody today. Again, that's race hustle rhetoric. And the reason, I mean, like I said, you hear so much of it, it just becomes overwhelming. But the reason why I make these videos is so that you may know this. And if you run into race hustle rhetoric, you hear blacks start throwing around that rhetorical nonsense, you would know that it exists. Plus, you will hear specific examples, and you'll be able to dismantle it and send black folks running for the hills, as opposed to white folks always running for the hills every time the race card is pulled. But anyway, I will continue to do videos on race hustle rhetoric because there's so much of it out there, and I've already done numerous videos so that you may be educated. And as you know, my saying, the basically saying on my channel, you know, now you know, and know this half the battle. And as always, y'all, and until next time.